that point was a changing point of, do I want to join the chaos or do I want to be a cycle changer?
We often don't have control over our circumstances, but we do get to choose how we respond. Some people teach with their words, others teach with their actions. Our remarkable guest today transfers profound wisdom through both her words and actions. She's already overcome more obstacles than many encounter in a lifetime. She walks through them with the relentless grace of a champion, all while having the humility and courage to share what she's learning along the way. She's a highly ambitious woman with a generous heart and a brilliant mind. She's a fully present mom, a wildly successful entrepreneur, and the kind of friend you want by your side. Bree, you're never going to let us settle for less, and you lead the way and bring us with you. You're the kind of person that will celebrate the journey of our progress and then challenge us to even more. So shake out your hands and get ready to take notes, because this is a masterclass in amping up your growth, leadership, and impact. Please welcome my good friend, Breanna Goodwin. Hey everyone, I am so excited to be here today with my friend Bree. Bree, thank you so much for saying yes.
Yes, so excited.
I know. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Bree and how she and I know each other before we get going here. So my other friend, we have another mutual friend named Bree Gossett, who actually was right before the pandemic. I had messaged her and I said, hey, I have this vacation club that we are not going to use. I'm definitely going to go by myself. My mastermind girlfriends can't go. Do you want to go? And she was like, yes, absolutely. And so I said, who else do you want to invite to come with us? And she goes, I know. How about I have a friend, our friend Bree Goodwin, that maybe could come. And I said, oh, no. I didn't know her at all at that point, and my exposure to her had just been seeing who she hung around with. And so I said, absolutely not. And she said, look, she has a child. She probably won't even be able to go anyway. Let me just ask her, but you got to trust me. She's great. You'll love her. And so literally like 10 minutes later, she called me back and said, she said yes. And I went, oh, great. Because, when you're hanging out with someone for a couple days, it's fine. But when you actually go on vacation with someone, it's a whole different dynamic. And I'm so glad that Bree came with us. And she wasn't just this flash in the pan young gun who became successful in our business so quickly with a not very kind heart. She actually has the complete opposite. And so, Bree, I love your generosity. I love your ambition. I love how quickly you move. There were so many conversations we had when we were in Cabo together that Bree and I were still talking about it, and we turn around and you had already executed on things. And so it makes me really uncomfortable. It's one of the things that I love, that when you're around people that make you uncomfortable, sometimes that means that it's helping you grow. And so you've helped me with that so much. And then I think we came back and literally the pandemic started like a week or two later. Yeah. So I think everything we had talked about was pretty much not even a possibility at that point. So the other time that I really, really appreciated was a couple years ago. My niece went through some things herself, and I felt like I was not equipped to be the one to have that conversation with her. Who you are and the work that you've done on yourself, I knew you would be the right person to have that conversation with you, and you were. And she just absolutely adores you. She has navigated through it beautifully, and I know that was in part because of your starting point with her. So thank you for that. So we all have a story, and we get to decide how we tell that story. And so let's just start with, tell us who you are, tell us your story.
Yeah. Well, I always tell people I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm an open book once you really get to know me. I wasn't always like that. It's been a long journey for sure. But if we go back to, just kind of, I think it's interesting to know how people were raised and their upbringing and really what makes them who they are. And so I do have two older, half sisters, but I was really raised an only child. They were much older than me and I never lived with them. And so my mom was extremely, at one point, vivacious, huge personality, a servant of people. My dad was a business owner. He's ran his own plumbing contracting business for years. Very hard worker, can fix literally anything. And then times change, right? And so I say that because sometimes people have on the outside what we call the white picket fence,
Yep.
and that's what people see. And then on the inside, they don't potentially see the trauma or, the disconnect that is happening. And so, if we were to look back at my mom, there was a lot of things that were unhealed in her past that I didn't
Mm.
understand at the 10, 14-year-old version of myself,
Yep.
that started to bleed out into our family, and vice versa for my dad. And so there was a lot of colorful childhood, a lot of addiction, a lot of things like that started to come up. And the reason that I bring that up is that, being a child of that, not understanding how to maybe navigate that, you can react in a couple different ways. And I was always a high achiever in school. I was always, great at my grades and wanted to work really hard. However, I might have had high self confidence, but I had really low self esteem. Could I have put
Mm.
words to this then? Absolutely not. This has
Mm.
taken years to be able to put words to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, with that low self esteem, looks like acting out and throwing away success
Mm.
because of my parents' behavior, because it allowed an excuse to play smaller, to
Mm.
where I was messing up things in my life at that time. Now, call it rebellion, call it your teenage years, call it now understanding what was maybe going on for me. I don't know. But fast forward through that, I homeschooled myself. I finished when I was 16 years old. I was always the person who just wanted to go work.
Yeah.
Um, and then I was working 3 jobs at one time. I got married when I was 18. So I was married 2 months after I was 18. And
Wow.
so I grew up very fast, very young. And when I turned 20, 2 months before I turned 21, my mom actually passed away.
Mm.
And it was a completely unexpected. It completely changed the dynamic of our family. And from then, that point was a changing point of, do I want to join the chaos, or do I want to be a cycle changer? Now, again, if you would have asked 20-year-old Bree that verbiage, I would have never been able to put that there. But I knew I couldn't end up like her, even
Mm-hmm.
though I loved her, and that something had to shift.
Yeah.
And I knew that if I didn't shift, I mean, she took her life. So what was that going to mean for me? What was that going to look like for my
Wow.
future? And so that really changed everything. A year later, I was a hairdresser at that time. I owned my own business. I always wanted to be on my own. I was always a go getter and a self starter. Um, but then Mary Kay came into my life, and that popped in. I never thought I was going to do anything with it, and I ended up meeting a woman who looked like my mom, who had been
Mm.
in sobriety for a certain amount of years, that walked me through that path, and really started to transform what I didn't even know was available, of
Mm.
growth and confidence and business skills. And I all of a sudden started to see this whole other picture in this vehicle, that I could take this change in who I was into helping first myself. You got to help yourself first, and then into
Right.
helping other people. So that ended now. I mean, I'm sure we're going to get into it and dive into it more, but the quick synopsis of that is I've been running that business now for 12 years, and have gotten to really join the top of that company. And really, my passion now is being a leader who gets to help women bring up those awarenesses, and just really allow them to have joy and abundance in their life, and making that process maybe happen quicker than they could have even fathomed for
Yeah.
themselves. I do have an 8-year-old son, and I homeschool him as well. So we're starting that cycle over. I'm a single mom, and I stay home with my animals, and I love my freedom and flexibility. And so it's just going to be super fun to dive into all the other things with you, because you know me so well.
I know. Well, I cannot skim over though the you did skim over the things that you went through growing up. You chose to be a victor and not a victim. How did you do that? I mean, there's so much brilliance in you, but just like, how did you choose that? What did that look like?
Yeah. Well, sometimes there's traumatic events that happen, and you have to say, am I going to be a victim to my circumstances? And am I going to allow this to forever change anything good, coming my way? So, again, did I understand that then? Something innately was in me. And I remember going to therapy right after this happened. And I remembered that therapist said something to me that was so huge. And she said, "You vibrate up here. You were born that way. And your parents vibrated down here, and you didn't really know how to mesh. And so this is your chance to just be able to meet them, or for you to grow beyond them." And so for me, that was huge. It hurt, because if you want to be a victim, you're going to blame people for why you're at in your life. I could have had every reason to blame people. I could shame myself. I could justify my behavior. Those are the three things I say, that if you're having a victim mentality of what is probably happening, or am I going to choose to take personal responsibility for my life? Am I going to choose to do the hard things and look at what can I control? And how am I going to move forward? Or am I going to just be upset and stuck in this place, forever? And not to say that other things didn't happen since then and that there hasn't been life trials, but that really did start the trajectory of building tools in my toolbox of how do I constantly work on myself, whether that's in my family or my business or, being a mom.
So for you, once you chose, did you ever get sucked back into a victim mentality, or was it just once you decided, you decided? Just checking. I don't know.
No, you do. It's like a recovery process. You've never arrived, I watch myself do it now, where you're so aware and you're like, oh, wow, why are you doing or saying that? Um, so, so it takes practice, it takes time. You learn things and, it's all concept and therapy or coaching. And then you have to go out into the real world and actually present that to the people that you want to have boundaries with. And it's not going to go always the right way. And you're going to have emotions. We're human beings. But one of the biggest tools, I guess, for those who are listening out here, and a coach of mine and best friend of mine, she always says this, is you cannot choose your first thought. That just happens to you. That's sometimes our habits, that's your belief systems, that's how you're raised, but you do get to choose your second thought. So what is your second thought going to be, right? To shift yourself out of it. So yeah, I may have a victim thought at first and be like, I just want to cry about it and sit in bed. But then I have to go, okay, what is my second thought, my more empowering thought to move me through?
Yeah. So are there tools that you've given yourself so that because it's like a muscle, right, that you're building. So how do you learn to, first of all, I think, become aware of the first thought in order to then choose the second one?
For sure. So, I mean, that's definitely even come up more, I think, in this last half of journey, even than before. In the beginning, I remember I think that when someone is open to growth, everyone's at a different place. So sometimes they're going to be a place of grief. They're going to be in a place of trauma. They're going to not have any of that. Maybe they didn't experience any of that, and they're just kind of in a neutral place where they're just kind of feeling stuck and not growing. There's going to be people who are already growing, and how are we going to amplify that? So, if you're listening to this, you might be in a different place in all of those. For me, I was kind of in this zone over here. So when it first started, I was just processing, I was verbalizing, I was trying to become aware of the habits, the dynamics, the communication, what had happened, and processing that, grieving it. Because what is that saying that I say? What I say? It's basically, what you resist persists. So if you continue to resist an emotion or resist understanding what happened, it's going to keep showing up in your life. So at first there was this purging. And I would say 90% of everything with growth is acceptance. Like, am I going to accept that this was my reality? This is what happened. This is real. Or am I going to stay in denial? Or am I going to choose to not do that? So that was the first process. So once we've accepted it, we're clear what's going on. The next step is, okay, now I'm gathering tools. How do I have healthy communication? How do I have healthy boundaries? How am I showing up for myself with self-care? How am I, now I know how to do that for myself and I'm in my safe little bubble, but how do I do that with other people? How do I
Yeah.
do that as a leader versus a
Yeah.
wife or a mom? There's different hats to that. So through the practicing with people is where sometimes those setbacks can come. And that is why the consistency of growing yourself or
Mhm.
having habits that keep you stable and foundational are so key, because life is going to rock you at points.
Yeah. So how do you now pass that on to your son, as because he has obstacles coming his way as well, right? We all do every single day. So what are the things that you teach him um, to
Yeah.
navigate?
Uh, well, he's 9. And it
I know
starts
it looks
young.
different
But
when you're 9,
I
right?
just want to put a picture of his age, because sometimes I think that parents, and maybe this is old school mentality, say, oh, they're too young. They don't understand that yet. But
Yeah,
they do.
they do.
and my son has maybe experienced more than some 9-year-olds, or not as much, so we can't compare that. But what I know is I can teach him how to have ownership of his feelings and communication
Mm,
now. I can teach him how to take personal responsibility of his actions and habits now, whether that be as simple as here's your daily routine before you step into electronics and devices and your day,
mm,
or whether that's him having a bad day and having to process some things in his life. How are we taking a moment to learn how to breathe through it, literally breathe through it? Like, how are we stepping outside to get grounded? How are we being able to put words to your emotions so you can, be able to explain that to
right.
me? How are you feeling a safe place to feel vulnerable as a man eventually, and not act like this can't be talked about with people? And so those are all things that sometimes it's hard as a mom, where I just want to freak out and just be a mom and, go to your room. And then there's other times where I'm like, how can this be a learning lesson? And how can I teach you to have goals and
Yeah.
know that you're going to fail at things, but keep going no matter what? And watch his mom do that. Watch his mom go after a goal and sometimes miss it. And how is he watching me pick myself back up and not
Yeah.
give up?
That's so powerful. But I think I you didn't exactly say it directly, but I what I heard is that you allow him to feel his feelings, acknowledge them, and not say you shouldn't feel like that or shame him for what he is feeling. Part is the first step, right? That's part of the
So huge.
acceptance. Yeah.
Huge, because we cannot, we that is the one thing with people, right? We cannot say, oh, well, you don't feel that way. So that's not a black and white thing. But I mean, how many people can go back to their parents who say, hey, that's not right, you shouldn't feel that way?
Right.
Well, whether he should or he shouldn't, he does.
Yeah.
So if we can at least allow him to feel that, then we can take that and guide him to maybe a different place later, or at least elevate it. As a little kid, that might look like much simpler things than adults, but maybe not. Maybe sometimes
Yeah.
we just need to take a deep breath and go draw a picture like a child. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
so it's now a brand new year. And so, first of all, what are you most excited about for 2024? But then also, we're talking about obstacles that come your way. What are you going to put in place? What would you tell people to put in place to navigate that?
Well, I am definitely going into a new season of my life. This has been an interesting 2023. I would say anybody would say even the last 3 years of life have been an
Right.
interesting phase of life, right? A lot of transition in the economy and the world. But for me personally, I am coming out of a 15-year relationship, and, going into a much different identity as a woman than I've ever been in. And so, going into a new year, some things that I am excited about is really recreating a new year of, I don't even know if the word is balance, but how am I going to create my schedule, whether
Mm,
that is work, my spiritual life, my son, to be in a place where I have extreme joy and I'm choosing it from a thought process of abundance not scarcity. And when I say that, and as you are maybe listening to this podcast and you're thinking about planning your 2024, are you choosing things because you feel like you have to or you're lacking something?
Mm.
Or are you choosing things because you're creating something and you want to enjoy your year? And there's an amazing other podcast, you can look it up, but that really goes into a thought of, am I having a hustle mentality, or am I choosing to have a consistent hard work mentality? See, both can take the same amount of time,
Right.
but one is acting as if all of your abundance and your money and your time is stopping, and the other one is it's just pouring into your life. So I'm really excited to go into this year reframing everything through that lens.
Yeah. So, and what are the things then that allow you to have hope? So you are extremely evolved in in reframing and staying positive, but for those people who maybe are not, where would you have them start? Even in how do you think bigger in 2024? How do you unleash the beliefs that might be holding you back or that are even allowing you to consider a possibility?
Okay, so for the sake of me staying on track, I'm going to tell you two things so we can come back to it. So the first thing is halting. I want to explain that because I think that's a very powerful thing that people can check in with themselves if they have no personal growth whatsoever. And great, now I think I forgot my second one, but halting and maybe I'll remember it in a second. But the first I got so excited about halting. Okay, so halting is if you're not evolved in your self-growth, if you've never gone, mentorship. Thank you. That's why I wanted to tell you about mentorship. Okay. So halting is are you hungry, angry, lonely, tired, sick, or stressed? So when I'm talking to people that I am leading, or even my child, or honestly, quite frankly, myself every day, when I am trying to go after bigger goals or stay consistent with meal prepping or whatever that may be after something, and I'm watching any kind of resistance or doubt, I have to check in with those areas. Because if I am, and it sounds really basic, it sounds really primal, but if I am hungry, I am not making clear decisions. Okay. I need to make sure I'm
I've seen
eating
that.
consistently. I'm not hangry. I've drank water. I'm hydrated, because I'm telling you right now, if you're feeling that way and you get off this podcast right now, go drink a glass of water and go outside, you are going to think about your goal a little differently.
Yeah.
Am I angry? Okay, do I need to have a moment to just have some gratitude come over me and think about that to shift my state? Am I feeling lonely? Okay, who's a powerful person that I could call? Or what are some self soothing things that I could do for myself to shift me out of that state, or music or journaling? Am I tired? Sometimes, as entrepreneurs, if I'm talking to the entrepreneurs out there, we feel like we have to push through and not take a break.
Yeah.
And again, my coach is like, sometimes you got to slow down to speed up. And so sometimes that looks like go take a 10-minute nap to lay down. So I'm far more effective than bouncing around.
Yeah.
Am I sick? Honestly, if you're hearing this right now, we are in a time of year where I keep hearing that everyone is getting some sort of cold. And I talk to a lot of women. So sometimes it's a cold or sometimes it's hormonal. Like, we're not clear. But so if that's the case, I'm like, don't make any decisions while you're in this valley, because you're vibrating much lower if you're feeling that way. And I promise you, just take a moment, take care of yourself, and you're going to think differently tomorrow. And stressed. Okay, so those are your halts. So how do you check in with them? How are you staying conscious of them?
Yeah.
Mentorship.
Okay, wait,
So
before
if
you go to
you have
mentorship though,
never done this,
hang on one second. I have
mentorship.
to interrupt you because I took a leadership assessment very recently, and the number one attribute that they look at is self-awareness. And I struggle to figure out. I have always been pretty self-aware. You are clearly very self-aware, but I thought, how do you teach this to people besides just telling them to pay attention? But halts is a perfect way. It's a perfect tool for people to start to become self-aware of, why am I behaving this way, or why am I thinking these thoughts? it's definitely a muscle. So, but right, if you, I mean, right, if you don't are not self aware, everything else, every other skill is between that and emotional management. Everything else is useless without those two. Yeah. Right.
100%. And I think that learning your halts is actually another way of learning self-trust with yourself, to go,
Mhm.
"Oh, that's what's happening. Oh, I knew how to adjust it. Oh, okay, I actually trust that I can manage my emotions now and that I'm not out of control,"
Right.
which then brings our anxiety down.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. It gives you
Yeah.
control. Like it's not hopeless because these are things you can easily fix. So, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right, mentorship. I want to hear.
Mentorship. I mean, obviously, if you've heard the tone of what I'm saying, is I had a mentor in my business. I had therapy. I've had many coaches over the amount of time. So it's not like I just arrived here by myself by any means. Especially if you weren't raised in that environment, this is all new muscles. And so I did do a while back. So great. The UPW with Tony Robbins. It was an
Mhm.
unforgettable experience. And I will never forget him coming out on stage and saying that, I even had to like look up his words because I wanted to find it. And he talked
Mm.
about a mentor is someone who goes before you. Um, Oh, that was my word. Sorry. That was me. Hold on. He says, find someone who is an expertise in the area that you would like to be mentored in your life that you want to do. So
Mm.
don't go find someone who you wouldn't want to trade places with.
Right.
Don't go find somebody who's doing it lackluster but kind of knows.
Mhm.
Get out of your comfort zone and go find someone who is an expert in it, because they're an expert in it because they dove into it, they had the mistakes, they created the consistency, they created the muscle. So if that means I'm creating a muscle with my emotional self, you want to go find someone who is emotionally healthy and who actually has the capability to teach you that, versus being in this Me Too situation where we're
Yeah.
kind of in a mess versus a mentorship, right?
Right.
So I would find a mentor this year, and you can have multiple. You can have one with your finances, your emotions, your business, your spiritual life. You can have them all over, because that's going to complete a full dynamic you.
Yeah. Well, and it does take courage to reach out to someone who is ahead of you and say, "Hey, I need some help." But I promise you, 99%. And actually, if they don't want to help you, they're not the right person anyway. They're not the kind of person you'd want. But someone who is healthy and has that mindset is going to want to help you. So there's no need to be afraid of asking for it. And they don't all have to be live, right? I mean, what are there other ways that you can find mentors that if you don't have direct access to someone?
We live in an age that has it everywhere,
Everywhere.
Um, we have podcasts, we have books, there's so many, courses and things like that. And so, I remember that, yeah, I might have gone to a weekend with the Tony Robbins thing, but I didn't sign up for his program. But I came home and I dove into every podcast I could possibly find and started to hear the way that he thought, and how he was growing businesses, or how he spoke to people. And so there are things, and even our line of work, who will say their car is their education, because as they're driving, they're constantly filling themselves up with powerful information. And it can go the opposite way too. We have news that kind of gets crazy and insane. We have a lot of interesting, social media and things that can bring us down. So, how are we going to consume things that grow us? Some of the best books, there's so many, but I remember there's a top two. Of course, there's all kinds of leadership books, but I guess today is kind of coming a part of, if you're new into your growth journey, we're in the beginning of the year. If you're listening to this, how are
Yeah.
you starting from scratch? Um, there's two that come to mind. One is, how do you stop self sabotage? That one is really interesting because it really makes you aware of, where is my deserve level
Mm.
in finances, relationships, health, career. all those areas. And where am I self-sabotaging? Where am I, possibly throwing it away or whatever? So that's really a powerful awareness book. Another one, if you're wanting to understand how belief systems work or how manifesting works or attracting things works, there's all kinds of very deep ones. But another one, which, I mean, depending on your beliefs, can get a little interesting. It's called The Map by Bonnie Wansbury.
Mm.
And it's really interesting because she helps break down belief systems on a really easy level that are just ones you have every day down to very deep subconscious ones, so you can start to map out how you want the rest of your life to look
Mm-hmm.
at or look like.
Awesome. Yeah. I've not read the map, but the Stop the Self Sabotage, obviously. I think you are the one that recommended it in the first place. And everyone in our circle got it, and we did a whole study on it. I think it's even the one that we sent to my niece for her to go through. It is powerful, but you have to be open enough and have the courage to actually be truthful with yourself when you walk through it.
Well, I think that was a question you had asked too. She sent me a list of questions. It was like, what do you have to be, qualities to have a mentor? And or I don't even know, not to be a mentor, but to be mentored. Like, what would be your biggest quality or something that you're going to look at? And or what is a quality you appreciate about yourself? So for me, when I look back even to the earliest pieces of my career or my mental growth journey, it wasn't that I was smarter than somebody. It wasn't that you know, I don't even know the words. I guess the only word that comes up to mind is I had a willingness.
Yes, you do.
I had a willingness to be open and to be coachable. It didn't mean I took everything, but I had a piece of humility that was open to hearing and seeing where that would fit into my life, which honestly, willingness then goes into where am I also willing to take personal responsibility
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
myself?
You have a very remarkable capacity to be both extremely coachable and extremely generous with what you already know. Your humility is the right word. Um, because you said at the beginning that you're like an open book, there's no shame in anything in you, which I think is very different than most people. Most people are very concerned about what will people think of me. And so is that something that has always been for you, or do you feel like there was a point where you're like, I don't care anymore, this is not really me, this is just what happened to me? Or
Ooh, that was not always me at all. I think that when you
yeah.
kind of first met me, I was kind of coming on the cusp out of it. But my mother and her mother were always about how did everything look, and really
Mm,
kind of almost this perfectionism mentality about
mm-hmm.
everything. And so if you're going to be in that mentality, then you do care about what everybody thinks about you and perceives you,
Right.
and all of those things. And so that was really hard. And that led me in the beginning of my business to be far more guarded, to
Mm.
be much more, I guess, clinical, systematic. And I mean, if people met me, I just would have my arms crossed and I would be analyzing everything. And there was
I
a
mean, is
moment where I
that
realized, huh?
that's who I think you were when I, at least the first times that I saw you, I'm guessing.
Yes. And and then there was a time where I think that this was like in my coaching journey and like a transition in my marriage where I was like, that's not working anymore. If we want to look at it at a business standpoint, because we can track that with numbers and
Mm-hmm.
equate it, it was like my business was dropping, my retention was low with my people, and I was wondering why I had to work so hard to constantly create new business, and that was exhausting.
Right.
And so you could look at that as a leader and go, what's wrong with my people? What's going on with them? That's what a lot of
Yeah.
managers or sometimes poor leadership does. And I thought, there's one common denominator and it's me. So I need to dive into this. And that really started the vulnerability journey, I think,
Yeah.
and really being open to bringing down my guard and knowing that it was safe and that I could step into people's worlds and get to know them and grow relationships with them. And that is when, again, if we want to look at it at a business standpoint, for those of you who are scared and think it's just the bottom line and we got to get the job done, I mean, my business doubled and tripled when that
Right.
started to happen.
Relationships. I think though for you it's, and this is for everybody, but what I watched is as your confidence and self-esteem grew, you are more able and willing to step into that, right? Cuz when you're not stable yourself, to then walk in and hear other people's stuff, or I mean it will rock you. So it really does start with yourself.
And I have a bomb drop with that one that just came up. So I just feel like we have to go there. Is when you say that, being stable in yourself, if there's anyone listening to this right now that is potentially unstable in their relationship, I do believe your relationship is the tree trunk to your life. And so,
Mhm.
if that tree trunk, again, my mentor had said this to me, is rotting or not going well, you're not going to feel strong in all these other branches of your life, because if you don't even feel safe at home, how could you feel safe in these other areas? So someone
Mhm.
can't complete you, they can't make you feel a certain way, but there's two things to look at. How am I building trust with myself and taking care of myself? And also, what situation is my living situation in that might need to shift a little
Right.
bit?
But and you working on yourself is going to give you more courage to be able to address the second one, right? So
Yes.
it's just being strong in it. So I you have so many pieces to your puzzle, and I know that you're everything you do comes down to legacy. So what is it that you're working towards? Why do you work so diligently at growing yourself and impacting people? What's your legacy look like?
My legacy. I mean, there's been a base of it, throughout my business, and it's evolved. I mean, definitely over the last 12 years, but the bottom line is I get to speak to women all day long about making them the best version of themselves. And if they get to grow a little bit, whether that be in their finances, their self esteem, or their confidence, they are going to go home and they are going to speak differently to their spouse or their children. And when they are a different, more confident, more worthy mom of themselves, their kids are going to change, and that changes generations and generations to
Yeah.
come, because and so that's where that cycle changer piece comes about. How are we creating healthy family dynamics, people who want to grow, people who think more abundantly, joyful relationships, and just honestly join the journey of what you're doing. I meet people all the time who are tired and they're burnt out and they don't enjoy their life, and they're choosing it, to be honest.
Right.
So if we could choose something different, what would we want it to look like? Because that affects everyone else around you.
Okay, so you are very clear on what it is that your intentions are, uh your purpose. So what does it look like for you? Like how does that play out in your daily life now? Is it just in your Mary Kay business? Is it in everything you do? What does it look like? And maybe what does it look like moving forward?
I think that if you have a mission, it's not just in your business or your career. It becomes almost a being of how you operate in everything. And so it's not something you know it's your mission when you just can't shut it off. Right, and just go, it's work time, so we'll do this now. And so I watch that happen every day in the way that I speak to my son, or what I want for him as he grows older. I see that even in restoring. I started with talking about family addiction. My dad is now 8 years, in sobriety, and we're best friends. And just watching that evolve because of, that personal growth of coming full circle. It happens in people with, I get to have conversations with my, congregation and the people that surround me there, or just friends or family, whoever it is. I'm constantly being that person who, so I guess to say, don't be afraid to be the person who sparks the elevated thinking in the room.
Right.
You can do it everywhere you go.
Yeah. I think, I mean, to just
Then
spell
that's
that,
who you are, Claire. You're the disruptor. You are the
I am.
disruptor.
I
You are
love
the one who
disrupting.
asks the questions.
I do. I love
You
asking
are the one
questions.
who doesn't let people just play small. You are the one who did that for me and brings that out of people. And that has happened in every facet of your life, too.
Yeah. I mean, I think when someone is trying to figure out what their why is or what their purpose, their impact should be, I think you hit it on the head that it's not just something that should be just for your business. It is trying to look at patterns in your life. Like, what has always bothered you? What has always or inspired you? Both things. And it should, to some degree, be a common thread in your life. And I mean, I don't know that I found it really, except for maybe in the last 10 years of my life. So if you're 20, 22, maybe you haven't figured it out yet, just keep asking yourself those questions, right? So, all right. So we are coming up on time, but I want to make sure and ask you a couple of rapid fire questions. You kind of already answered the
Okay.
question about books. Those are two great books. We'll put them in the post or post them down. What about podcasts? Like, what do you listen to when you want to shift your mind?
I do listen to right now is an interesting season, so I'm listening to a lot of things about family. I think podcasts are so interesting, but I love to listen to ones about um, what is her name? Stacy Bowman, and like I said, my friend, I listen to hers all the time. Michelle Costas, I listen to Tony Robbins, I listen to Brené Brown, I listen to Ed Milet. I listen to all these different things that just whatever aligns. What is that guy that he's so we you have sent me
Lewis?
so many videos, huh?
Lewis Howes? No. Who?
No,
Mm,
it starts with an S, and he's really analytical, and he always breaks things down. Or
oh, who breaks
when
things
we
down?
find him, we'll put him in the
Yeah,
chat.
we'll put him in there. We'll put it in there. Let me figure out who it is. There are so many. You're so right. All
Yeah.
right. So, what do you have a favorite quote? Something that stays top of mind all the time. And you already said, what
Hmm.
was it? What you resist persists. That's one of them. I'm gonna
That's
guess.
a good one.
Yep.
Another one I thought about when you were asking me this morning in the shower was I was like, what is one thing I say all the time? And it is unperfect action is better than perfect procrastination,
That I feel like is the theme of
or
your life.
imperfect
Yes, absolutely. That is so you.
action. So many people are all in the thing thinking.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
I'm one
So
of them.
imperfect action is better than perfect
Yeah,
procrastination.
I love it. Okay, and what do you think progress looks like for you personally this year? How will you know at the end of the year that you have made progress? Because I feel like as humans, that's what makes us feel like the year was not a waste.
Okay. So this is an interesting thought that was presented to me a couple of years ago, and I want to offer it to people this year because it really got me excited. Is you can go after the same exact goal, which may not seem like progress, but do it in less time and more ease,
Oh,
and that is progress.
yeah,
And so if I could go after some of the biggest goals I've hit, but with having much more time and abundance, so I know that I can even grow it the next year, that's what progress looks like to me this year, is refining it in a way um, that just gives me even more time.
yeah. I love it. That's so good. Okay, and I feel like this is a hard question for a lot of people, but I feel like it's not gonna be hard for you. What is one quality that you love about yourself?
I think I wrote it down. Did I write it down? Uh, I don't. Oh, quality I love. I wrote a couple.
No, it's not a bad thing. I feel like this is like the road to learning who you are and becoming self-aware is also understanding what makes you uniquely you. So that's why I asked the question.
I guess the biggest one, the overall one, is I love that I am someone who will never give up.
Mm,
I know that I may change my mind about something. I know that something else may be exciting at the moment, but what I do know about myself and what I have learned is I am never going to give up on being better or growing myself, or going after something, which then goes along with words that we've already talked about, is is that willingness, whether it's being an achiever, loving to win at something. I used to be ashamed by that or embarrassed that, like, I think there was like a time period where we didn't realize that I liked to win. And then all of a sudden I realized I like pay attention to winning all day.
All day. Right. It's in the name of your organization. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I'm winning if I drink enough water. I'm winning if I made my bed. Like, if you could learn to celebrate yourself like that every day, it's a powerful thing.
So good. Okay. All right. So this podcast is intended for those people who want to amplify their lives. So live out loud and on purpose. So what is a question that they could be asking themselves in order to amp it up? Like a self-leadership question, maybe.
I wrote that down, and I was trying to get this precise, but I guess is, if you're willing to amp it up and you're looking into 2024, the question would be, what are you aware of that you're not taking action on? Like, what do you already know that you're pretending not to know?
Right. I feel like you might have asked me that question very recently, actually. It's so good. It is. It's really good. All right. And what can we do to amplify your voice? Because I want to make sure the leaders out there that are worth following, their voices get louder. So where can they find you, and what can we do to amplify your voice?
Where can they find me? You can find me. I don't even know my Instagram handle. That's sad. Let me just tell you really quickly.
We'll put it on the bottom.
Okay. Breanna_Goodwin MK. I've been really trying to amp that up, and it has my website and everything on there. But so of course you can follow me, but the best thing that you could do to amplify my voice is maybe take something you heard from this podcast and go teach it or spread it to someone else, because that's what truly creates the cycle changing, is when you not just consume information, but you apply it and then you go share it with someone else.
I love it. Yeah, actually, I would love something that you got out of this podcast. Type it in the comments below of what is it you're going to do with it, so that we know that this is benefiting you. All right. So Bree, thank you so much for saying yes today. This was so much fun. I feel like we're going to have to come. I feel like we can talk for hours on this. So we could go in so many different directions. I know. And if you're watching this, thank you for tuning in today. Remember that no matter where you are in your journey, there's more to you than the hats that you wear. There's more in you than you can even imagine. And there's more for you out there just waiting for you to receive it. So have the courage to take it the first step and amplify your life.